Yo, what's up everyone? I know it's been a while since I last made a Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy video. I just wanted to make this video to share my thoughts on a few things before the State of Play and Summer Game Fest shows. This game has been such a huge part of my life, and I just want to enjoy and have fun with the lead up to this end of our unknown journey. So yeah, let's just get right into the video. So one of the things I wanted to go over were the possible names they might use for the last installment. So the names that were on the top of my list were Reunion, Return or Returns, Reborn, and Reclaim. Reunion was a title that could have been used if they didn't use it for Crisis Core, but since they already used it and they have already stated they will not be using it for the final part, we can definitely just check that one off the list. I think this was a huge missed opportunity here by Square, and I think it would have been such an amazing title for this final part, but it is what it is. Returns is probably the most popular name out of all the ones that I mentioned. This is one that I see most people lean towards, but for me, I don't vibe with it. It reminds me too much of Lightning Returns, and no offense to the Final Fantasy 13 fans, that series just wasn't for me. And it just, I don't know, it never clicked with me. So for me, I don't think they'll use that one. Like I said, it's way too similar to that title, in my opinion. If they're saying that Reunion was already used with Crisis Core and they don't want to reuse that, then I don't see why they would use Returns, even though it's linked to a different Final Fantasy numbered title. I still don't think that would be a very good name for Part 3. Reborn was another one that I saw a lot of people talk about, but since this was way too similar to Rebirth, I don't think this will be used. But yeah, I don't think they'll reuse the same name twice, just worded differently. But the name that I really lean towards is Reclaim. Reclaim has been mentioned quite a bit by Sephiroth and Cloud throughout the game. Not only does it fit Sephiroth's agenda and goals, it honestly fits the rest of the characters as well. Cloud is trying to reclaim his memories and his identity. Tifa, Barrett, Sid, Vincent, Aerith, Zack, Red, Kate, all of these characters are trying to reclaim something, whether it's a memory, a purpose, a relationship, a piece of themselves, something they've lost. Everyone is moving towards some form of closure, and this is why I really like Reclaim as a title for Part 3. At the end of the day though, I don't really care what they call it. I just want them to give us the name already. Give us a logo, give us a title, give us something. We've been sitting here for 2.5 years, and we don't even have a name for it. The least they can do is give us a name. For the logo, I think with the trend that we've seen with Remake and Rebirth, and not the cover art, but the art that they use for Rebirth, showing Cloud on the left with a teal sky, Sephiroth in the middle with a red sky, and Zack on the right with a light blue sky. I think the next color they're going to use for the third logo is going to be like a light blue sky, and that's going to be in reference to Zack, because I think he's going to play a very big role in Part 3. So that's my prediction of the logo and color they're going to use. Now that we've talked about the title, where does Part 3 actually start? A lot of people assume we're immediately heading to Icicle Inn, and we're going to go straight into the snowboarding section and eventually make our way toward the Northern Crater. I think there's a pretty good chance that's where the main story picks up, but I don't think that's the first thing we're going to see. I feel like they're probably going to start this game with a flashback. Personally, I think we're going to get some kind of Sephiroth flashback. Maybe a young Sephiroth, maybe something connected to Ever Crisis, involving Glenn, Matt, Lucia, and that entire storyline. The reason I keep coming back to that is because Square has already started planting those seeds for those characters. We know those characters exist. They're part of the larger Final Fantasy VII universe now, but if you're someone who only played Remake and Rebirth, you probably don't know much about them. You've heard references, and if you played like the minigame in Cosmo Canyon, you've seen hints of them, but don't really understand who they are. And honestly, Part 3 feels like the perfect opportunity to bridge that gap between Ever Crisis and this remake series. Not only would it give players more context about Sephiroth's past, but it would also allow Square to introduce those characters to a much larger audience. The flashback section gives them the perfect opportunity to give us a taste of the new enhanced combat that they probably juiced up for this third part. They did it with Remake and Rebirth. They're more than likely doing it for Rebirth into this final installment. But yeah, I think a tutorial of some sort, since the scene at the Icicle Inn wouldn't have much combat because it's very similar to the Calm intro. I think a flashback with a tutorial with those characters would be pretty cool. The thing that got me thinking though is, what if we don't even start at the northern continent and we actually double back to Rocket Town? Since this was skipped in Rebirth, then maybe it makes sense to double back, head to Rocket Town to prepare the team to go north, and this would actually give Square the opportunity to give Sid a bit more character development and allow the players to get a better sense of who he is and kind of introduce him on a larger scale versus him just being our pilot that kind of just flies us around everywhere. So yeah, I think that would be interesting if we went and double back to Rocket Town, because if you remember too, when we're at the end of Rebirth and the team kind of flies off in the Tiny Bronco, when they're flying off, I didn't see any like snowy mountains. It almost felt like they flew southwest or south, and in that direction from the location that they are at the Forgotten Capital, southwest would be in the direction of Rocket Town. So like Nebel region, Rocket Town area. So that kind of like got me thinking that maybe they double back to Rocket Town since we skipped it, and then that's kind of where we're gonna actually start, and then we're gonna make our way to Northern Crater. So yeah, just a thought on that. But yeah, let's talk about something that doesn't really get talked about very often, I don't think. But how big is part 3 actually going to be? Because every time I sit down and think about everything that's left, I remember something else. I'll be sitting here thinking, okay, so we still got Wutai, and they're going to treat that as a huge region now. It's not optional. It's actually going to be a part of the story. And then I'm like, okay, we got the Northern Crater. We got Mideel. We got the weapons. We got the submarine. So underwater. We got to travel underwater. We got the return to Midgar. We got to do outer space. And before I know it, I'm sitting here wondering, how the fuck are they going to fit all of this into one game? Because there's still so much left, right? Like I mentioned, we still have Wutai. We got the Northern Crater, Mideel, underwater exploration, return to Midgar, outer space. We got to deal with the weapons. We got to figure out Fort Condor. We get the Highwind. We have to go and unlock Knights of the Round. And that's just the stuff we already know about, right? That's not even counting all the new story elements that they've introduced into the remake project. I don't know. This game is going to be massive. Maybe I'm overselling it. Maybe I'm just super excited or overexcited. But every time I think about it, the game just feels bigger and bigger. And I feel like I'm forgetting things too. Especially if they introduce the Highwind. Highwind is going to become one of the central features of the game, right? They've already said this before. Like, the Highwind is a central feature of the game. They kind of want to build the game around that, right? So when I think about Rebirth, the two things that immediately come to mind for that game and like the theme and stuff, it was exploration and like being able to not be restricted to Midgar and being able to visit all these new cities and towns, and obviously the bond between the characters, right? So your bond with Tifa, your bond with Barrett, your bond with Red, your bond with Aerith, all that, like friendships and relationships and stuff. So the whole game was built around exploring the world and strengthening your connections with your party. But part 3 feels like they remove those shackles, right? In Rebirth, we were restricted to land and there were barriers. The ocean, you couldn't travel all of the ocean in the world. You were very restricted. But part 3 feels like freedom. So once you get the Highwind, those boundaries, those shackles, they're gone. They disappear. You're no longer traveling region by region. You're no longer restricted by terrain. You're traveling the entire world. And honestly, that's something that I've been looking forward to ever since they announced the trilogy. To just be able to fly around on the Highwind and explore the whole world of Final Fantasy VII is just so exciting to me. And I think that's like a big impact, right? It's very iconic in the sense of being able to just travel the world. I think that was something that was very memorable for me when I played Final Fantasy VII in 97. It was just liberating, and it was exciting to get on the Highwind and hearing the Highwind theme, or the song when you get on the ship and you're flying around the world. Yeah, I think it's gonna be one of those moments that everybody is gonna remember, and I can't wait to see how they handle the Highwind. The other thing people forget is just how much optional content still exists. Like I've mentioned before, we're probably gonna go back to the Gold Saucer. We're definitely revisiting Cosmo Canyon. You know, we still have to go back to Midgar. We're gonna revisit all the previous regions from Rebirth, and Fort Condor, the weapons, chocobo content, hidden bosses, secret locations, Knights of the Round. Knights of the Round is iconic, right? I think Knights of the Round is going to be a huge deal in this final installment. I can absolutely see them building an entire quest line around it, something similar to the Proto Relics in Rebirth, something that takes a long time, something that feels like a real journey. Knights of the Round should feel special. It's the most busted summon in the game, right? And it's probably a very iconic summon in Final Fantasy. It's one of those summons that you shouldn't just walk into a cave and pick it up. There should be a sense of accomplishment when you finally get it. Now, when it comes to like playable characters, this is where I was kind of sitting down and really thinking about things and how Square can approach this, because I think they're going to surprise us. They've shown that they're willing to let us control characters outside of the main party when it serves the story, right? We've played as Zack, we've played as Sephiroth, so why should they stop there? I genuinely think we're going to get opportunities to play as other characters throughout Part 3, and I think the Turks are at the top of that list. I think we might be able to play as the Turks in Wutai when the party goes there. I think we're going to be able to play as Cissnei at some point. Other characters that I can think of is probably Matt and Lucia. I think those are going to be playable characters, especially if Square wants to connect Ever Crisis to the remake project. I feel like Part 3 is the perfect place to do that. I don't think these characters are going to be permanent party members, but definitely some temporary playable sections for sure. And I think that would be pretty awesome. One of the things I love most about the remake project is that it has expanded the world of Final Fantasy VII. It hasn't just retold the original story, it's given side characters more relevance, it's given secondary characters more depth, and it's made the world feel bigger than it ever did before. Part 3 feels like the perfect opportunity for them to really capitalize on this, because when you really think about it, there are so many different groups involved now. You got the main party, you have Shinra, you have the Turks, they're going to introduce a lot of Wutai stuff, you have Zack, you have Aerith, you have Sephiroth. Everybody's story is slowly moving towards the same destination. And I think Part 3 is where all those storylines finally collide or reunite or have a reunion of some sort. And I think because of all of this, this game is going to be huge. It's going to be enormous. I think with Rebirth being 2 discs, this game has to be at least 3 discs or more. Not just because of how many locations there are, not because of all the side content that they can include, but because of how many moving pieces they have to bring together before the finality of this game, before they can wrap everything up and call it the end. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about for this game, because if they pull it off and if they do it well, Part 3 has the potential to be something really special. Not just because it's the biggest game in the trilogy, but because the culmination of everything they've been building towards since Remake. And that's just so exciting to think about. So now let's talk about Zack, because honestly, Zack is probably one of the bigger mysteries heading into part 3. I recently talked about this with my buddy Blitz, and I somehow ended up with more questions than answers. And maybe that's the point, because Zack isn't just another character anymore. He's not just like a random flashback that you get in OG. At this point, he's become one of the central pieces holding this entire mystery together. The different worlds, the livestream, the reunion, the tear in the sky, whatever Sephiroth is trying to accomplish, Zack is connected in some way. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I feel like Square is using Zack as a bridge between all these different storylines. Big question though is why? Because if Sephiroth's goal is some kind of reunion between worlds, then Zack feels like one of the clearest examples of that process already happening. And not because of Sephiroth alone, but because Aerith is now moving parts around as well to kind of counter Sephiroth. At the end of Rebirth, Cloud can now see the tear in the sky. So obviously something has changed. Something has happened. The worlds that they showed us aren't completely separated anymore. At least that's how it feels, right? And then we have Zack. At the end of the game, he's in a church, which immediately raises another question. If these worlds are tied to memories within the livestream, then how are physical things crossing between them? That's the thing I keep coming back to. How does Aerith transfer the white materia? How does Cloud carry physical objects between worlds? How does Zack exist as a physical being in places he shouldn't be able to exist? If these worlds are memories, then why do they have physical consequences? And honestly, that's like one of the biggest questions I have going into this final installment, because it's not just some abstract mystery anymore. It's affecting the story directly. We've seen it happen multiple times. Aerith has done it with the white materia. Cloud has accepted the white materia and then given it to Aerith in his world. And now Zack appears to be in our party's world as well, right? So the more I think about it, the more I feel like Zack's ultimate purpose is bringing all these storylines together. Outside of the fan service, he's the bridge. He's the connection point. Every time something happens in regards to the world, Zack somehow ends up in the middle of it. Maybe that's intentional, maybe I'm overthinking it, but that's where my head keeps going. Now, as far as Zack himself goes, I do think he's eventually going to reunite with the party. I think he's going to see Cloud again. I think he's going to see Cissnei again. And I think he's going to reunite with his parents. I think we are going to get those emotional moments with him. And I think he deserves them. After everything Zack has gone through, after everything he sacrificed, I think those moments matter. But I don't think Zack is going to stay with us forever. And that's probably something people don't want to hear, but I think that's just the simple truth to it. As much as I like Zack as a character, his character has actually grown on me over the series, especially obviously because of Rebirth. I don't think his story ends with him living permanently in the main timeline. When I look at Final Fantasy VII as a whole, one of the core themes has always been loss, grief, and accepting loss, right? And I think Zack's journey has to reflect that. Not because he deserves a tragic ending, not because he deserves to suffer, but because accepting his death is the final step in his story. Zack has always been selfless. He's always put other people before himself. He's always been willing to sacrifice for others. That's who he is. And eventually, I think he's going to reach a point where he understands what needs to happen. And when that moment comes, I think he'll finally return to the live stream. Not as a punishment, not as a tragedy, but as closure. Because ultimately, that's where Aerith is. And I think that's where their reunion is going to happen. Not in the physical world, not through some alternate timeline or world, not through some ending where everybody survives and everything gets magically repaired, but in the live stream, together. after everything they've been through, I think they've earned that. I really do. I think that's the reunion that they've been denied for so long. Yeah, we get it in Advent Children for like 5 seconds, but honestly, I think it's one of the most beautiful endings Square could give them in this game, right? Because it really does stay true to who they are. It stays true to the theme of Final Fantasy VII, and it gives both characters the peace that they've been searching for. Now, I don't know if Square is gonna go as far as doing all that, but I really hope that they do, because I do think that they've earned it. One thing I know for sure though, Zack's role isn't about surviving. It's about helping bringing all of these storylines together. He's become one of the emotional centers of the remake project, and I think part 3 is where we finally understand why. Everything they've been building with him since remake, everything they've done with the alternate worlds, everything they've done with him and Aerith, I think it all starts coming together here. I genuinely want to see how they explain all of that though, because right now Zack is the biggest question mark in the story. Like one of the biggest question marks in the story. And I can't wait to see how they deliver that. And with that, I think that kind of leads into what I think is the biggest theme of part 3. Acceptance. Not just for Zack, not just for Aerith, but for everybody. Especially Cloud. Because when you really look at Final Fantasy VII, it's always been a story about loss. It's been a story about grief. It's a story about learning how to move forward after tragedy. And I think that's exactly where part 3 is headed. One thing that I've thought about a lot is how are they gonna handle Aerith? Because obviously Aerith's role in this story doesn't end with her death. We've already seen that. We've already seen her influence events. We've already seen her communicating across worlds. We've seen how important she still is to everything that's happened. But at the same time, I don't think that Square is going to keep her in that role forever. I think eventually Aerith has to also accept her place in all of this, just like everyone else. She has to become one with the planet. She has to fully embrace what she's become. And honestly, I think that's important not just for her character, but for Cloud's. Because if we look back at Advent Children, Cloud never truly moved on. He carried that guilt with him for years. He blamed himself for Aerith. He blamed himself for Zack. Because of that, he never really allowed himself to heal. He spent years carrying around this weight that he couldn't let go of, and he pushed everyone away. And honestly, that's one of the saddest parts of Cloud's story. Not that he experienced loss, but that he never forgave himself for it. That's why I think part 3 is going to be different. I don't necessarily think they're going to change the outcome. I think Aerith is still going to die. I still think Zack is going to still be dead, etc. I don't necessarily think they're going to undo everything, but I do think that they're changing how the characters process it. I think they're giving these characters the opportunity to find closure, to heal, to move forward, to finally accept what happened. Because acceptance isn't forgetting. It's not pretending something never happened. It's learning how to live with it. It's learning how to move forward despite it. And I think that's exactly where Cloud's journey is headed. Eventually, he's going to reclaim his memories. He's going to understand the truth, and he's going to confront everything he's been running from. And when that happens, I think we're going to get a version of Cloud that's finally able to move forward. Not because he stopped caring, not because he forgot about Aerith, but because he finally understands that carrying guilt forever isn't what she would have wanted. I also think Aerith plays a huge role in that, because one of the things that held Cloud back was the fact that he never really got closure. Part of him never accepted Aerith's death. Part of him kept holding on, and I think part 3 is setting up for a different outcome emotionally. Not necessarily a different outcome in terms of events, but a different outcome in terms of healing. I think Aerith eventually reaches a point where she needs to stop guiding Cloud the way she has been. Not because she doesn't care, but because she understands that in order for him to move forward, he has to do it himself. He has to accept the loss, he has to accept the grief, and he has to keep living. Because he is Zack's living legacy. And I honestly think that's beautiful. Final Fantasy is about loss, right? About grief. It's a thing that I keep mentioning. But it's also about finding hope after tragedy. And it's been about carrying the memories of the people we love while still moving forward with our lives. And if part 3 really is the conclusion to this journey, then I think that's exactly where it needs to end. Not with despair, not with endless sadness, but with acceptance, with healing, with closure. For Cloud, for Aerith, for Zack, for Tifa, for the entire party. And honestly, for all of us who have spent decades following these characters. Because in a weird way, we've all been on this journey together. We've all grown up with these characters. We've all carried these stories with us. And now we're finally approaching the end. And that's why I think acceptance is a perfect theme for this final chapter. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. And because it's something every single one of these characters has to face before the story can truly end. I think that's part of the reason this whole thing feels so emotional for me. This game has been a part of my life for so long. I was in a very different place when I first played Final Fantasy VII. And in a lot of ways, this game has helped me through some difficult times. It helped me connect with people. It helped me build friendships. And some of my favorite memories growing up are tied directly to this game. I remember staying up until 3 or 4 in the morning at my best friend's house, taking turns playing, taking turns fighting Emerald and Ruby Weapon, taking turns trying to figure things out. We didn't have YouTube back then. We didn't really have Let's Plays or things like that. We did have Game Facts, that was OP. But you didn't really know what you were doing because you were just trying to figure things out on your own. And that was the magic of it, in my opinion. I remember sitting there for hours trying to breed chocobos, trying to get the gold chocobo or the black chocobo, I can't remember. And nobody really knew what they were doing, at least not in my friend group. We were just trying to figure things out as we went. Someone would hear a rumor that you can revive Aerith, and we'd sit there for hours trying to get her to come back. The little things like that were just, we had so much fun doing that. I remember finding Lucrecia's cave, learning more about Vincent, learning more about Sephiroth, finding hidden locations that none of our friends had found yet. Every time we thought we'd seen everything, the game would surprise us again. There was always another secret, there was always another mystery, always another reason to keep exploring, and that's something that I've never forgotten. Those are some of my favorite gaming memories ever, not just because of the game itself, because of the people I experienced it with. The conversations, the excitement, the late nights, the feeling that there was always something new waiting around the next corner. And in a weird way, this remake project has allowed me to reconnect with all those memories. It's allowed me to go back and revisit something that meant so much to me growing up, and that's why this trilogy and this game and this franchise is so special to me. It's not just nostalgia, it's not just a remake, it's a chance to revisit something that has shaped a huge part of my life. So the road to part 3 is exciting. I'm excited for the reveal, I'm excited for the trailers, I'm excited for the title, I'm excited for all the theories and discussions we're gonna have over the next year or two, but at the same time, it's bittersweet, because once part 3 is finally here, that's it. The trilogy is complete, and the journey we've all been on since the original remake announcement, the journey is coming to an end. And I don't know if it's fully hit me yet. Maybe it will when we see the reveal. Maybe it will when the final trailer gets released. Maybe it won't hit me until the credits roll. Or when I first boot up the game and I hear the, start menu music. Who knows? But the closer we get, the more I find myself thinking about this game. Still, more than anything though, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we got the remake. I'm grateful that we got Rebirth. Because if you would have told me 20 years ago that we'd eventually get a full Final Fantasy VII remake, I would have told you that you were crazy. I never thought we'd actually get this, and now I'm sitting here talking about the final game, and that's wild to me. So until then, I just want to enjoy this time. Make some videos, talk Final Fantasy VII Shop with all of you, share theories, share our memories, and just appreciate the fact that we're lucky enough to experience all of this in the first place. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's not about ships. It's not about any of that. It's about the appreciation for the memories this game has given me, the appreciation for the franchise, the appreciation for these characters, for everyone that has worked on this project, from the developers to the engineers to the marketing team to the voice actors who have been amazing. I don't think I could have picked a better cast than the one that we got. I think everyone has been phenomenal, and I appreciate everyone that has put in the time and their blood, sweat, and tears into this project to bring these characters to life for us. And ultimately, the appreciation for the fact that after all these years, we're actually getting to see this story finished. If we get something at Summer Game Fest or State of Play, I'm definitely going to be covering it. I'll be reacting to it. I'll make videos in regards to it. I'll be sharing all my thoughts with you guys. But until then, let me know what you think. What are you most excited to see in part 3? What theories do you have? Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for letting me sit here and yap and talk about Final Fantasy VII for 40 minutes. Honestly, I could do this for hours, but I don't want to make this video way too long. But hopefully next time we speak, we'll have a title, we'll have some content, we'll have some trailers, and yeah, until next time, guys.